Hi guys, welcome back. Right now what I am doing is just slashing through the midpoint of the waist to point 19, and I opened it up with 4 cm. Then I'm using sticky tape to just stick the paper that I put underneath it together with the pattern. After that, I'm going to blend in all my lines. Then I'm going to trim out all the excess paper that I no longer need. So that's what I'm just doing right now in the video, blending the lines and trimming off the excess paper. The next thing I did was to measure downward from the waist 4.5 cm. Then I ruled a horizontal line across it. So this horizontal line is going to serve as my waistband. So I'm measuring the that is left, then I'm going to eliminate it at the side of my trouser. So I've just done that, and I'm blending it into the hip line and folding that area away. The next thing I did was to lay my fabric on fold on the table. Then I traced around my pattern. Once I was done tracing around my pattern, I added my seam allowance. I added 3.5 cm at the side seam, 1 cm at the top waist, 2.5 cm at the center back. Then I also added 1.5 cm at the inseam, then about 6 cm at the hem. You can do between 5 cm to 6 cm. So I'm just connecting all the lines. Mind you, the video at the top is the same with the video at the bottom. I just decided to put that one at the bottom to give you a clearer view of what is going on at the top video. So far, this is what the trouser looks like after we've added our seam allowances. So the next thing I did was to cut out my excess fabric from the center back, as you can see. So I'm just cutting along the seam allowance. After I was done cutting along the seam allowance, the next thing I did was to repeat the same process for the front trouser pattern. So I'm just marking downwards, and I'm going to rule a horizontal line across it to create my band, my waistband. So I'm measuring my dart, and I'm going to take it out from the side seam. So I'm going to eliminate my dart. The next thing I did was to fold my fabric and place my pattern on top. Then I'm going to trace around my pattern and add my seam allowances, just like we did for the back pattern. But now we are doing the front pattern. So after doing that, I'm just cutting along my seam allowances. As soon as I was done cutting out my front pattern, my back pattern, this is what they look like. So I folded my lining into two, then I placed my front pattern on top my lining. So on this side, I'm going to add just 1 cm or ½ inch. Then on the hip side, I'm going to be adding 1 inch. That's about 2.5 cm. While the waist area is just going to remain the same. I went ahead to edge stitch my lining to my fabric. You can see the edges. I just stitched them closely. Then I pleated the excess allowance I have You don't want your lining to be the same as your fabric, so you want your lining to be slightly bigger. So the next thing I did was to put my trouser pattern right side to right side, and I'm going to stitch around the crouch area. After stitching the crouch area for the front and the back, this is what they both look like. So I am going to press it with my iron. So you want to press the seam open so that it can lay flat and smooth on the body. So I'm just pressing it from the inside, then I'm measuring from my back waist 22 cm downward, and so I'm going to trim off this excess. I'm trimming off this excess because I don't really need it. I actually need the 2.5 cm just to help me install my zip at the top waist. So right now I am just pressing my seam open, and this is what my trouser pattern for the front and my back pattern looks like. So you put them right side to right side and pin the sides together. So I just pin the sides together, then I'm going to stitch them on my machine. After stitching it, the next thing I'll do is to press it again. So right now this is what the trouser looks like. It still requires some more pressing. The next thing we'll be doing now is to iron again, or press. So I'm just pressing again the side seam, and you want to put a fabric on top of it because you do not want to mess up your fabric, just in case your iron develops stain. So the next thing I did was to get my pattern out and trace my waistband on a fresh sheet of paper. So right now I'm just eliminating the darts from the side, but you can decide to just fold your dart away if you do not want to eliminate it from the side. But I'm just showing you different ways of doing it. So the first way is to trace out your dart and just eliminate it at the side like I have just marked. Then now I am adding my seam allowances. I'm adding 1 cm at the top waist, and I didn't add any seam allowances to the center front. So you can decide to just close your darts by folding it away, or you can decide to just eliminate your dart from the side. So you can see that when I folded my dart, it has been eliminated from the side. So you can as well again just trace out your waistband by closing your dart, and don't forget to label and indicate which side should face up and which side should be stitched to the waist of your trouser or pant. So I'm just adding my seam allowances, 1 cm each, and I am connecting the lines. So this is my center front and my side front waistband, and this should be cut on fold. Onto the back pattern, I also repeated the same thing. Place my pattern on a fresh sheet of paper, trace it out with my tracing wheel, including my dart, and I'm just measuring the excess that I have at the waist so that I can eliminate it from the side of my waist, just like we did in the front pattern. So that's one way. So I'm just making sure I got all my lines traced out. Now I'm trimming out the band, and I'm folding away the dart. So I'm blending in the dart. So I'm just using sticky tape on my band. Then I'm tracing it on a fresh sheet of paper for my center back. And so I'm going to add my seam allowances. Please don't forget to label and don't forget to indicate which area is going to be attached to the waist. So I'm just adding 1 cm at the bottom and 1 cm at the top. At the center back, I'm going to add about 2.5 cm, while at the side back I'm going to add 1 cm. So 2.5 cm is what I'll be adding to the center back, while 1 cm is what I'll add to the side back. SB is for side back. So these are just the two methods I've shown you. One has the seam allowances, and it means you have to join the waistband together. Why this other one, you have to join the waistband together before you cut, so that you have like a curved shape like your waist. So I just join my side back waist with my side front waist with a sticky tape. So it means this waistband is not going to have a joining at the side, because we've already joined it by using a sticky tape before we even started tracing out and cutting. So we're going to cut this on fold. However, because my fabric was not enough, I decided to go with the one that has joining at the side waist. So this is me just ironing, fusible interfacing. So I finished ironing interfacing on it. What I'm just doing right now is tracing along my pattern, just so I can get an exact line. I've traced at the back. Okay, yes, I've traced at the back. So when you trace out, you want to make sure that you write whatever labeling you have on it, you want to write it on the fabric too. That way you'll be able to know where each area stands for. Don't forget to notch your center front at the top and at the bottom. Now I'm going to unpin everything and show you how to repin your fabric. I'm just unpinning my pattern from the fabric and labeling again. So right now this is how it's looking. So this is one of the waistband, and this will serve as a lining or a facing for it. This is for the front. Yes, don't forget to label. Don't forget to label. Now what you want to do is make sure that your side front should be pinned to your side back, right side to right side on each side of your fabric, and you stitch it together after pinning. So you repeat it for both of them. Now that I'm done stitching them together, I'm going to go to my ironing table and press the seams open. Then once I finish pressing the seams open on those areas I sewed, I'm going to place my waistband or waistband and waist facing. Okay, let's put it like that. My waistband, I'm going to place them right side to right side like this. The next thing I did was to place my waistband together and make sure that the center front notch meet each other. Then I'm going to stitch along the area that is not going to be joined to my waist. So I'm just stitching the top waist. After I finish stitching it, the next thing I'm going to do is to top stitch it carefully. So I'm just top stitching it right now, and after I finish top stitching it, the next thing I'm going to do is to iron my waistband. So I'm just pressing my waistband and also making sure I do not get my waistband stained. That's why I'm putting another fabric on top. So you want to carefully iron your waistband. So I'm done ironing, and right now this is what it looks like. The next thing I did was to use my serger on all the rough areas, excluding the waist. Now that I'm done serging, what I'm going to do is mash up my notch area. So this is my center front, and this is the side that has the top stitch. This is the side that doesn't have the top stitch. So the side that doesn't have the top stitch will have to lay flat on your fabric or your dress or trouser. Then you're going to match the front notch mark to the center seam of the trouser. So it's going to be something like this. Okay, so then I'll pin this round till I get to the end. After pinning, the next thing I did was to sew it using the sewing machine. Then I went to the ironing table and pressed it for it to look smooth and neat. The next thing I did was to flip the band and carefully fold out the seam allowance. So I'm just carefully tucking it underneath and I'm pressing it with my iron. After pressing it, I pinned the outside part of it using pins. So I'm going to be top stitching it just underneath the band. This is what it looks like. The next thing I did was to fold the hem of my trouser. So I'm folding it with 2 inches, which is about 5 cm, and I'm using loose stitch on it because I'm going to loosen it later after I am done ironing it. Now I'm installing my zip at the center back of my trouser. Because I didn't have a 2 inches wide crinoline, I decided to join my 1 inch crinoline to make it 2 inches. So this is me just using zigzag stitch on my 1 inch crinoline to make it 2 inches. So this is my trouser or my pants, depending on what you call it where you are. And this is the inseam. So this is inside my leg and this is the outside seam. So I have loosened my trouser hem. So this gaiter line here will serve as a guide for me to put the crinoline. I've actually added crinoline to this, but I haven't ironed it yet. So I just wanted to bring something to your attention why I'm using the crinoline or crinoline, however you call it. So if you notice, this one I put the crinoline has like this standing structured effect. Why this one that I didn't put the crinoline has just a flat hem, and this is what I'm actually trying to go for. By the time I press it now, it's going to like really be smooth and crispy. So I'm going to show you how to apply or attach the crinoline here. So I marked out 1.7 inches, which is about 4.5 cm long stripe of fabric, and I'm going to be using that strip or stripe of fabric to just close the edge of my crinoline so that it doesn't fray or damage my fabric. So I edge stitch it, then I'm going to fold or tuck the excess fabric into the crinoline, and I'm going to stitch on top of it. After stitching it, next thing is me just putting the crinoline into the hem of my trouser, and I'm going to stitch on top the crinoline that is in my trouser hem. I'm just stitching at the tip or at the edge of the crinoline on my trouser hem. So you want to repeat the same process at the end of the crinoline on the other side. Just make sure you carefully tuck in the excess fabric and you stitch on top the fabric. So this is more like creating a closure for the crinoline. The next thing I did was to trim off my excess thread and bring the fabric together at the side, that's the inseam, and stitch it close after I finish installing the crinoline. So I'm just stitching the side of the fabric closed. This is what it looks like. So we'll give it a very good press when we are done. After pressing it, I measured 9 inches from the hem of my trouser upward, and I marked 3 inches into my fabric. That's from my side seam line. I marked 3 inches, even though in the video you can see 2.5. I changed it to 3 inches. So I'm just marking each point, and the distance between each point is about 2 inches. That is, the buttons will be 2 inches apart. So the next thing I did was to grab my needle and thread and picked each of those areas that I've marked, and I attached the buttons on those areas. Attach it at the front and at the back of the trouser. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in subsequent videos. Take care and bye for now.